Strange New Worlds returns. I'm breaking down the premiere, decoding the clues, and sharing bold theories about what's coming next. Well, hi everyone, I'm Nick and welcome back to Sci-Finatics. Well, after a break of over 2 years since we last saw Strange New Worlds on our TV screens, the third season has finally dropped with the premiere episode Hegemony Part 2. Going back to the old TNG style cross-season cliffhanger where we got Hegemony Part 1 at the end of Season 2, and now we've had to wait 2 years to get the conclusion to this cliffhanger episode. So today I'm going to go through the episode, talk about everything that went on, break it down, give my review as per usual, and discuss everything that happened in this premiere episode of the new season. So let's get into it. The episode begins with the big Gorn attack. This is the sneak peek scene that we saw a while back, which basically showcased the beginning of the episode. We've got a massive Gorn attack, the Enterprise trying to jam comms and everything to stop them, and using the rare element technique on the dud torpedo to track the Gorn mothership through hyperspace so they can eventually recover their crew, which they can't get back right now. It's always good to start with a bit of excitement. I think it's a good way to kick off the new season. I loved that throughout this opening, musically, we got a little bit of a homage to James Horner, him scoring other Star Trek things back in the 80s like Wrath of Khan and everything. There was always a little bit of a music cue that James Horner always used to put in all of his scores, which was what I guess you would call the danger theme or the absolute peril theme, which was that which obviously plays throughout this episode where we've got the Enterprise in absolute peril. So a nice little homage there musically to some of James Horner's stuff. We also get this weird shot here in the opening where just before they go to warp, we get this ethereal shot of Pike saying, "Hang in there, guys," or "hang in there," which doesn't seem like it's connected to the rest of Pike's performance in this scene. It almost seems like it's out of time, or something about it is not quite anchored with the rest of the goings on in this scene. It's outside of that. So I'll be interested to see if this moment comes back this season to explain exactly what this moment represented. Because it almost seems like an internal monologue from Pike or an out-of-time Pike talking to his earlier self or something to that effect. We go into the opening titles of the new season and then there's a few new shots in there which look cool. Every season they've maybe swapped out maybe 25% of the shots in the opening title sequence. We get a few more cool ones in there this season with a few shuttlecraft and everything. It's always good to mix up the opening titles a little bit. It gets boring if you're just watching the same ones over and over again each season. So I'm glad they throw a few extra visual effects shots into the opening here, just to make it a little bit different each season. The Enterprise rendezvous with the fleet and Admiral April. We get to see a few little other Starfleet vessels here in the background, very, very briefly. That's one thing I would like to see more of, I think, in Strange New Worlds. In the past, when we've had other starships in Strange New Worlds, it's been other Constitution class vessels like Batel and the Cayuga, which is Constitution class. And even though we have had Kirk and the Farragut do a few things previously in Strange New Worlds, we've never really gotten any close-up glory shots of the Farragut, or we haven't really seen the Farragut in any detail whatsoever. It's always been from a distance, looking through the haze of a sun or a nebula. Nothing looks clear or obvious. So I would like to see more Starfleet vessels of different classes in this era. We go to a scene with Batel and Chapel in Sickbay. Batel is still infected with the Gorn eggs, which if they don't do something about that pretty imminently, they're going to hatch and burst out of her and everything, and her chance of survival is 0. So they're going to put her into stasis to freeze the process so that that doesn't continue. However, that doesn't quite go to plan because it turns out Batel is allergic to the sedative they need to apply to put somebody into stasis, which means she can't go into stasis because she's allergic to this cryo serum that they need to use, which basically means that Batel has less than 24 hours before these Gorn hatchlings burst out of her. Mbinga obviously isn't on board, it's just Chapel. Mbinga's off been captured by the Gorn with the rest of the away team from the end of the previous season, so Spock's going to lend a hand science-wise to help Chapel see if they can come up with a solution to get Batel out of her predicament. Which is good, I think, because we've got Spock and Chapel saying their goodbyes Obviously they've been reunited, and Chapel hasn't gone off to do her fellowship with Corby just yet, and it gives Spock and Chapel one more moment of interaction together just to get a bit more of that relationship issues with them concluded perhaps before Chapel heads off for a few months. Admiral April puts the fleet on standby, which Pike is not particularly happy about. Pike wants to punch back, he wants to rescue his crew. Admiral April's being a little bit more conservative, but unofficially he kind of allows Pike to punch back against the Gorn. I'm not going to give you an order to, you just do what you think's right, and I'll just look the other way. Then we get a scene with Pelia and Scotty trying to make this, not cloaking device, but I guess you'd call it like a transponder changer or something, where they can basically disguise the Enterprise on scanners to appear as if it's a Gorn ship. Scotty obviously got this to work with the shuttlecraft, but he's having a little bit more difficulty in retrofitting it for the Enterprise. Next we get a scene inside the Gorn mothership, which we see our away team waking up inside these biopods with Lan freeing herself from this big fluid sac, and then she frees Mbenga, and then Sam, and then Ortegas. I love the production design. Seeing this environment with this really frightening organic situation that they're all trapped in these weird pods. It's a very similar situation to the Alien franchise with the pods and the face huggers and the chest bursters. It's quite horrifying with our away team being trapped in these sacks and having to rip their way out of them, aborting themselves from the Gorn digestive process, which is pretty horrifying. And even Ortegas comes out of one of these pods with her hand partially digested. She's missing fingers and everything. It's, oh my god, this is disgusting. And it's giving Lan some PTSD. She's having flashbacks of her brother that was killed by the Gorn that we saw flashbacks of again back in season 1. But luckily for our away team, these digestive pods can digest organic matter, but they can't digest weaponry, so it seems like their phaser rifles and so forth have been crapped out the back of this waste pile, so they have to clean them off, and luckily their phasers and so forth still work. Scotty's still working on the transponder device to get the Enterprise looking like it's a Gorn ship on sensors, and I love this interaction between him and Pelia, where Pelia panics him into fixing it, basically saying, oh, the Gorn are about to kill us, we're all about to die, you better get it fixed quickly. And it basically forces Scotty into coming up with a solution incredibly quickly, because Pelia realizes that Scotty works best under pressure, and if she can put the pressure on him, he can come up with a solution a bit faster. Pelia has a great laugh about this, but Scotty isn't particularly impressed by her joke. But I think it's great to see this relationship between mentor and protege. She knew what she needed to do to get him to deliver the goods. The Enterprise enters Gorn space, and luckily for them, Scotty's got it all fixed in time. The Gorn ships bypass the Enterprise without attacking. Good thing that Scotty's device worked, starting to build up a bit of that miracle worker resume. And they're able to track the Gorn destroyer mothership to a very dangerous part of space, which they're going to have some trouble traversing. Batel is in sickbay, and they're looking for solutions. Spock and Chapel have a bit of a deep conversation about their relationship. Chapel's still going to study with Corby for 3 months. Spock realizes this is the case. At the same time, they're trying to run simulations to try to solve Batel's Gorn infestation problem, but nothing is working. All the simulations are failing, and it looks like they're in a bit of a bad way. But they have the idea to perhaps try and use some of Number One's Illyrian genetically modified DNA to see if it can help Batel. Back on the Gorn ship, it looks like the away team is looking to steal a fighter of some kind to escape from the mothership, although I'm sort of thinking with Ortegas's hand partially digested, she might be struggling to fly a Gorn fighter out of there. We'll get back to that later. Back on the Enterprise, Number One, Uhura and Pike are talk of tricking the Gorn into a fake hibernation. They see that they've essentially woken up and they're heading for a full-scale invasion of the Federation, which seems to be rather imminent. Number One has given her blood to try to help Batel, and rather than being a 100% chance of death now, at least Batel now has an 86% chance of death, which isn't great odds, but still better than 100%, so I guess they're going to go with that. I find this solution somewhat ironic. It's going to be interesting to see what emotional weight this plays going into future episodes, because we know that Batel was the prosecuting counsel at Number One's trial as an Illyrian, and now it's Number One's Illyrian genetically enhanced blood transfusion that's potentially going to save her life. Even though Batel was sort of pressured into being prosecutor and she had no choice in the matter, I think this solution, if it does in fact work, is going to give Batel a fresh appreciation for Illyrian genetically modified situations where we can use Illyrian modified genetics to help cure things in a good way, and it's not just to create Khan Noonien Singh type warlords. So I think that's good to make that distinction. But I'll be interested to see how that plays out in future episodes. The Enterprise enters this high radiation zone, which basically disables the warp engines. They can't go to warp. It would appear that Gorn ships are intentionally flying into a sun, which is more so like a cloaked or hidden area of space. A little bit like how, I guess, Wakanda is hidden from the rest of the Earth. In the Marvel universe, the Gorn fly through this very specific point and they enter the Gorn homeworld region. Back in Sickbay, Batel is convulsing. They've got to do the surgery now, imminently, otherwise she's in trouble. The Gorn invasion fleet's headed for Federation space. The Enterprise must pursue and come back for their people later, and they launch a comms buoy to come back and save the away team at a later stage. Spock and Chapel ready for surgery with Batel, and Marie is injected with Una's Illyrian DNA. And they come up with the solution to try to create this sort of stellar flare. Uhura's worked out that in moments of stellar flares, this is like a sign for the Gorn to trigger their hibernation cycle, which, the second I heard it, sounds very much like Best of Both Worlds Part 2. After a season cliffhanger, nobody knew how they were going to solve their problem with the Borg, and Picard managed to give a message to Data saying, "Sleep, Data, sleep." Beverly thought Picard was exhausted, but Data realised that Picard was trying to send them a message to trigger a very low-level command in the Borg to essentially put them to sleep, so they stopped their attack on Earth. And this triggering the solar flare to put the Gorn into hibernation mode seems very much ripped out of Best of Both Worlds Part 2. I mean, call it a rip-off, call it a homage. I guess I could go either way on this one. It's like, I can see how it's a bit of a homage to Best of Both Worlds Part 2 and how they solved the Borg invasion in that cliffhanger, and this being a very similar cliffhanger as well. Part of me likes the homage nature of it, but also it's like, come up with something original. We've been there and done that solution before. It would appear Batel is responding to Una's Illyrian blood infusion, and Spock has the idea of feeding the Gorn hatchlings so that they don't feel the need to burst out of her, so that the Illyrian blood infusion can essentially break them down and absorb them into Batel's body, which has its own potential problems, I think. They didn't sort of mention it in this episode, but I feel like having Gorn DNA absorbed into Batel's DNA, even though she's got the Illyrian blood transfusion, I feel like that's something that might come up in a future episode that could come back to bite them in the end. Quite literally, if Batel has these Gorn DNA absorbed into her own DNA, whether we might see some situation like Jeff Goldblum, say, in The Fly, where he slowly metamorphosized into a fly because he had the fly DNA absorbed into him, or in District 9 with Vickers, where he got the prawn serum thing sprayed in his face, and then he gradually, over the course of the film, slowly transformed into a prawn. I feel like maybe by keeping the Gorn DNA and absorbing them into her body, something like that could maybe be down the track in the future for Marie Batel. Back on the Gorn destroyer, Lan is still having some flashbacks of her brother, and she gets transport codes from like a random biosac. This moment struck me as a little bit too convenient. It's like they're just in some random digestion pod. It's not even like the Gorn transporter room. It's just some random biosac that they happen to be next to, but she says, "Oh yes, here we go. I've just found the transporter codes." I could understand that if they would manage to find their way into what was the Gorn transporter room or something like that, but just accessing them from this random pod, and then being able to read Gorn as well. Like, I know she's had history with her brother and everything, and she has a very basic, rudimentary ability to read basic Gorn words and commands. Being able to fully unlock and understand Gorn transporter codes off this console did seem to me like it was just way too convenient and way too implausible that she would be able to do that. I think if an expert linguist like Uhura was part of the away team, I probably would have bought that a little bit more. Gorn soldiers are alerted to their presence and they start attacking the away team, and poor old Erica Ortegas is stabbed by one of these Gorn soldiers, and thinking, oh geez, this isn't going to go well. Worried for poor old Erica. It's a thing with watching Strange New Worlds, I think, when things happen to characters who aren't in original series. There's obviously a level of awareness where you know what's going to happen to Pike. Uhura's going to be okay, Spock's going to be okay, Chapel's going to be okay, Mbenga's going to be okay, even Sam Kirk's going to be okay for a while, because they all end up in original series. But Characters like Latta and characters like Ortegas, you're a little bit more worried for these guys because you don't know what's going to happen to them. They could go the way of Ned Stark potentially at any time, to use a Game of Thrones reference. There's a little bit more worry, I think, when things happen to characters that aren't in original series. You go, ooh, well, I'm worried for Ortegas now, I'm worried for Latta now, because we don't know where they end up. The Enterprise activates its sunshine beam, turns itself into like a solar flare, as Erica flies the Gorn fighter out of the mothership, despite being really, really badly injured. She's got one hand that's half melted away, and she's been impaled by a Gorn. She's got blood pouring out of her chest cavity, yet she still manages to fly a complex Gorn fighter away from the mothership, perfectly flying in a straight line without crashing into one thing, as if she's flown this thing 1,000 times before. Now, Ortegas is a pretty badass pilot, but with only one good hand and a critical wound to her torso from being impaled by a Gorn, this job to fly the fighter out of the mothership was going to fall to somebody else, because as good a pilot as Ortegas is, I just thought maybe she's a little bit too injured to perform this task effectively. The escaping fighter manages to communicate with the Enterprise, and the hibernation trick works. All the Gorn go home because they think it's time to sleep. They go into hibernation, and they save hundreds of the Parnassian settlers, which was very quick to beam up hundreds of settlers off the Gorn mothership in a matter of seconds. That seemed maybe a little bit too convenient. It's like, we've got them. We've got 200 people immediately beamed up in the transporter room. Even if they could beam up 10 at a time or something, it just seemed very, very quick and convenient that they were not only able to save the away team, but save hundreds of colonists as well. That happening so fast, in such greater numbers, struck me as too BS. I would have liked to see half the colonists die, and they managed to save half of them. I think that might have been a little bit more plausible, that they were able to rescue about 50% of the colonists, which I think even that would have been a win, but to say, hey, yeah, we've saved all of them, and do that so quickly in the transporter with so many people, is a little bit implausible. And it seems now the Gorn is in complete hibernation, so they don't have to worry about dealing with the Gorn for a while. That's very convenient, isn't it? I would have liked to see some jeopardy hold over from this event, to say, we don't have to worry about the Gorn anymore because they're all in hibernation mode now for a while. A little bit of a one-size-fits-all solution. I think some jeopardy remaining, I think, would have been good here, rather than just a one-size-fits-all solution. The fleet alert is cancelled, but Ortegas is in a bit of a bad way. She's in sickbay. She's in critical condition, but stable. I love the callback to the Lotus Eaters episode from season 1, where as she's being dragged back into the Enterprise, she still has the guts to say, I'm Erica Ortegas, and I fly the ship. That was good. That was a lovely little callback to season 1, and that was probably one of my favourite moments from the episode. Ortegas manages to do it in a critically injured state, but she's Erica Ortegas, and she knows how to fly ships. So yeah, I love that callback. Spock and Chapel have finished the procedure on Batel. Recovery obviously is in Batel's hands now. This maybe was also a little bit convenient here too. I thought the fact that we didn't really see what Spock and Chapel did. They were about to start the procedure, we cut away, and then when we cut back to Spock and Chapel, they'd finished the whole procedure. So I was like, well, what did they actually do here? I want to know. I want to know how they fixed her. So I think we were a little bit deprived of going along the journey with Spock and Chapel on that procedure, and only seeing them essentially coming out of sickbay once that had been completed. I think it was a little bit of a situation where they stole that from audiences. I think we would have liked to see that. Pike visits Batel and he starts to pray. Batel regains consciousness, and there's an emotional moment here between Batel and Pike. Batel's not perhaps over the moon with the fact that she got treated with Illyrian infusion from number 1, but it saved her life, so I guess she'll have a new added appreciation for genetic modifications now after her life has been saved through this process using number 1's blood. And the Enterprise heads back to Federation space. All in all, I really enjoyed this episode. I think it had a lot to offer for a first episode for a season. I love starting the new season with a big bang. I think we got some really good moments cutting back and forth between the Gorn situation, with the surgery going on with Batel and Chapel and Spock, and we had the away team on the Gorn mothership, and we had a bit of action, and a few heartfelt moments and everything between Spock and Chapel, and also Batel and Pike as well. And all in all, I enjoyed this, and some moments of levity as well, which was good also. So all in all, I think this was a pretty solid start to the new season. But let me know what you guys think. Leave a thought in the comment section and we'll get chatting about that. Be sure to check my merch store for plenty of cool Star Trek themed merchandise and everything, and obviously subscribe to Sci-Finatics if you haven't done so already. And I'll be back tomorrow with my review for episode 2 of the new season as well. I'll catch you guys then.